Hello and welcome to this special episode of the National Security Conversations. Early this morning at around 3:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time, 12 Mirage aircraft of the Indian Air Force crossed into Pakistan and repeatedly carried out a strike against terrorist training camps in Balakot, reportedly in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan. The Indian Foreign Secretary briefed the media later in the afternoon and said that this is a non-military preemptive strike, and in which Yusuf Azhar, the brother of Masood Azhar, has been killed. You would recall that this is the leader of Jaish-e-Mohammed, the group that carried out the attack in Pulwama on the 14th of this month. On the Pakistani side, Asif Ghafoor, the ISPR chief, claimed that the Pakistan Air Force detected Indian Air Force jets in the Muzaffarabad sector in POK, forcing them to release their payload early and scramble back into Indian airspace. The Pakistanis have claimed that there have been no casualties and there has been no damage at all. So the questions that we are asking today are, what was the actual nature of the Air Force strike in Pakistan, whether it is in POK or in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in mainland Pakistan? What is Pakistan likely to do now? Is it going to retaliate? Will this sort of thereafter escalate between the two sides? What are the political implications of this strike very close to the Indian general elections? To discuss this and more, I have with me in the studio Dr. Manoj Joshi, senior defense journalist, Mr. Siddharth Vardarajan, founding editor of The Wire, and retired Air Vice Marshal of the Indian Air Force, Kapil Kak. Welcome to the National Security Conversation, gentlemen. AVM Kak, let me begin with you. Could you explain to our viewers what really happened this morning?
I think important point is also why it happened, because the Prime Minister and the political leadership had said that there would be a sure-footed retaliation against Pulwama, a retaliation which Pakistanis won't forget. Now, these strong words reflect the fact that this was well beyond what was sort of envisaged and what was actually done in Surgical Strike 1. In terms of what happened is that firstly alert levels on both sides, Pakistani side and our side, perhaps ours were lesser, have been very high in the recent 1 week or so. And it was the government which had to choose of the 6 of 7 options which were available as a form of retaliation. They chose what I think is the best, for the simple reason that 12 Mirages, as per reports and which have been sort of confirmed by the Foreign Secretary, were sent to use that very astutely crafted language and grammar of what has been expressed in terms of the intent and actual fact. What happened is this was a non-military, this was a intelligence-based, non-military, covered preemptive strike on Pakistan, on the terror infrastructure. In that sense, the first point that needs to be flagged is that the Indian Air Force could send 12 aircraft all the way in despite the alert status. And Pakistani air defenses are extremely, that is one area in which they are not weak. So how did this happen?
What's your answer to that? How did that happen?
Because our capabilities have improved. While the numbers are hopelessly less and we need so much effort to get those numbers up, but our capabilities in terms of force packaging, in terms of force packaging mean you don't just send 12 aircraft and say go bomb and do whatever you want to do. You have AVACs with it. You have a certain element of air defense escorts with you, and you are able to, through use of satellites and other forms of intelligence gathering, you get precise intelligence. This facilitated the attack package to achieve one important objective of use of force, and that is that there will be no civilian casualties. This enhances the government's strength in terms of saying this is a very limited action to a very highly provocative attack at Pulwama. And this gathers the international kind of sympathy, which is part of the strategy of the government. In fact, if one carefully notices the press conference given by Vijay Gokhale, it was very precise, it was very focused, it was well crafted in terms of words and the kind of outcome you were going to achieve internationally. It looked like an international.
Before we move into the implications of that, I think it is important to get the facts right. I mean, you have a set of facts. Dr. Joshi, what do you think about it? Is it really possible for 12 Mirage aircraft to go into Pakistani airspace? And their air defense systems are pretty good, their surveillance is pretty good, and sort of carry out certain strikes and then come back into the Indian airspace without getting harmed. Is that really possible at all?
I think what used to happen was that the Indian Air Force used to focus a lot on the actual strike aircraft. Okay? Right. Here what you have done is you have the escort aircraft. You have aircraft which are suppressing air, which are jamming air defenses on the ground. There are they are also armed to destroy potential surface-to-air missile target, suppression of enemy air defenses, as it is called. So this the 12 Mirages, of these 12 Mirages, possibly 6 were actually all support aircraft. They were not even they were not even the actual fighters. You see, so using all this, you are able to create a path out there which baffles the. In any case, you look at the nature of the operation. Meaning, you are talking of if I calculate that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is 70 kilometers from the Indian side of the line of control. If you just calculate a Mach 1 kind of a thing, you know that this whole thing is over in 5 minutes. Meaning it's over in 5 minutes. So the other guy, first of all, has to react. So he must be on cap all the time. You know, even if he has to take off at a certain period of time. So the speed of the action, the proximity of the target is pretty, actually, by my reckoning, you could have even launched a Paveway 2 crystal maze bomb from the Indian side of the LOC. Meaning it is entirely possible because it has a range of about 70 kilometers. So if you can go by it, but I'm saying even if you penetrate 10 kilometers into Pakistan occupied Kashmir, you can still strike and be off in 2 minutes.
Right. Dr. Joshi, I think there's a lot more confusion here. The Foreign Secretary briefed the media at 11 o'clock this morning. And the details that he gave were very sketchy. I think there was already a confusion whether the target was the Balakot in POK or the target was the Balakot in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Do you think the government of India should actually put out more details to sort of clear the air as to whether, because going into mainland Pakistan is a very, very bold step?
I think the signaling or the messaging from the Foreign Secretary was calibrated to ensure that by putting out the least amount of information, you somehow will decrease the chances of Pakistan responding in a kinetic manner. Let's go back to 2016 even, right? Even there, and in fact, if you compare 2016 with today, it's instructive that September 2016, September 29th press conference, the DGMO addresses it, right? Here is the Foreign Secretary. The picture that was released of the CCS meeting last in 2016 had the usual CCS members, the ministers, plus your bureaucrats and your intelligence chiefs and your people from the army. Today's CCS photograph, there's nobody from the military present, right? And then you field the Foreign Secretary to do the briefing. So I think there's a very definite, even compared to the restraint with which the 2016 surgical strike was announced, this is an attempt to take a step even further back and to say that I'm not going to play this up. And I think Mr. Gokhale, I'm sure, went into the press conference knowing that there is confusion over Balakot. And he deliberately chose not to say where Balakot is. In fact, if you read his statement very carefully, he does not say we struck targets in Pakistan. He does not say we struck targets in POK. He just says Balakot.
Without E at the end.
Well, the statement doesn't say have an E at the end. So it's, but if I were to take his statement and Major General Ghafoor's statement, where Ghafoor talks of air intrusion in the Muzaffarabad sector. So Muzaffarabad sector cannot conceivably be expanded to include Balakot with an E, the small Balakot which is on the Rajouri Poonch side. So I think there is no doubt that Balakot in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was the target. Another puzzle that gets solved by what Manoj was saying, which is that if you're firing these munitions from some distance from your target, you don't actually need to go very far in. And Major General Ghafoor said Indian Air Force intruded 4 to 5 kilometers inside. So even that is consistent with the overall picture. So I think that there's no dispute about the target. Where I think we don't have information is what was accomplished when you hit the target. We've had a claim by the Foreign Secretary, which is again understated. He just says we did inflicted severe damage. Incidentally, he doesn't say that Jaish guy was killed. He just says that he used to be there. So we don't know. And then it's the media again on cue from what happened in 2016, which is amplifying stuff without having to give any source of information. So they're saying 300 killed, 400 killed, 500 killed. The public has no way of knowing what has happened.
How do you evaluate the military preparation that went into it? Look at it this way. You have a certain amount of political de-escalation in the last few days after the attack. Prime Minister Modi made statements that were not very escalatory in nature. 100 companies of paramilitary forces were airlifted into J&K to control law and order within the Kashmir Valley. There were no ceasefire violations from the Indian side in the last 5 days, whereas Pakistan kept firing, thinking that there was going to be a surgical strike of sorts. This time the Indian side did not use the army at all. How do you sort of then, looking at this picture, looking at these facts, how do you evaluate the military preparations that sort of went into this?
You see, insofar as the Air Force is concerned, if we sort of de-link the Air Force from the military, overall sense of the military, Air Force is ever prepared. And they know exactly what kind of a mission they will get. It's only the targets may be different. So there is a combination of target, weapon tactics that they evolve. Practice, after all, what was this recent exercise in Pokhran about? They simulate all kinds of eventualities, and it's a very simple thing of then how do you task it and how does the person who's going to fly the aircraft practice that mission. Firstly, put it on a simulator, do the simulator preparations. I mean, the entire, what I would say, range of options that Indian Air Force may have to exercise up. I mean, sort of, they're in the drill, they're in the library. You just take out that little video and you go ahead and do it. No, I'm not boasting, but this is what the ground is. As to, I mean, I'm glad Manoj supported what I said. The force packaging has gone to such sophisticated lengths. I didn't use the word seed or suppression of enemy defenses. There is every possibility they would have sanitized the radars so that nobody can see what is happening. They are blinded. They are completely blind. You can go where you want to, but it can't be done over an entire country. The preparation side, what are the two other points besides the preparation?
No, there was a certain amount of political de-escalation in the past week, and on the line of control things were quiet on the Indian side.
I'm not sure. The line of control has been very active last 48 hours.
No, I have the data. The data tells you that the Indian side did not fire. The Pakistani side was firing. That's right.
Yeah.
So we were as if, we were behaving as if nothing was going to happen. Things are sort of cooled down.
This is what I'm saying. For the first time, you have been able to put all the pieces together, and whosoever has done it, I think I admire that capability which we have got, except for this Balakot, where one person doesn't know which Balakot, and this sort of sends the wrong signal. But it's been extremely well done, that there has been no reaction from our side. Pakistanis are firing away. They have been firing away all night. But we have given that signal. But that is again, Pakistanis are not so daft. They would have guessed, you're talking about political de-escalation. The core of the statements that Prime Minister has been making, he himself, forget about the other ministers, are fairly indicative of a strong response by India to Pulwama. There is no doubt, absolutely no doubt, and it would have gone into the Pakistani mindset as to what to expect, and I'm sure they have time enough to now decide what they would do. That is the most critical part if we want to see where this goes forward.
Sure. Dr. Joshi, I'm sort of confused about this sort of phraseology, non-military preemptive strike. What do you make of that?
I don't know. I think only the Foreign Secretary can tell you what it means, because a military instrument was used. But I think
does it mean not acting against the Pakistan military?
You see, I think the point here is that it is you're right that it's targeting terrorists on a preemptive basis. So I think this is also designed to take into account any possible complaint that Pakistan could have taken to the United Nations or someone, and some international body. So but under the United Nations, you do have some leeway of preemptive self-defense, because after this you can go and technically you're meant to inform the United Nations Security Council that such a thing has happened. So now you may very well see the Indian side taking this to the United Nations Security Council, saying that we detected, and if you see the whole statement, it said we saw that there were preparations for yet another strike, and so we preempted that. That comes well within the Charter of the United Nations, and so this is aimed at a kind of a total package, as it were, to deal with this situation.
Siddharth, I get the feeling that the preemptive part signifies a lot more than what is sort of understood. I think it is politically lauded. It probably means that you're going to see this kind of action in the days to come. We've never sort of used this phrase preemptive, which means that if there is something that India knows is going to happen, then it has the right to sort of go in and do things. How do you sort of read the whole?
So I would say that I'll disagree slightly with Manoj. Preemptive, I mean, the right of self-defense is well established. Article 51 of the UN Charter. Right. There is a lively controversy among international lawyers about quote-unquote preemptive, right? Certain countries have exercised that right, notably the US, Israel, other big powers at different times. And, lawyers, essentially a lot of international law is what you get away with, and they've all got away with it. So in a way it's become, the lines have gotten blurred, and I would say that the war on terror, given the nature of threat that terrorism poses, telling a state that you have to wait for the threat to manifest itself in a more explicit manner before you can act, so there's been some kind of melding of the boundaries, and there is greater acceptability of preemptive self-defense today than there has been in the past. But you're right, India has not explicitly invoked this, to the best of my knowledge. In 2016, we came close to it. If you look at the DGMO statement, he spoke about information emanating from these camps along the line of control, that these launch pads were getting ready, etc., etc. So there was the element of preemptiveness was invoked without the phrase itself, right? But here the language is very deliberate. I would say that the use of the term non-military is also to signal to the Pakistani side and to reinforce for Pakistani public opinion, insofar as that is also a factor, that we did not strike the Pakistani military. So I think it's, and in fact in some informal briefings some of the briefings that the MEA is doing with the foreign diplomats, and this question is coming up as to what does non-military mean. The MEA people are saying that it means that we did not hit a military target. So this is new phraseology.
And also this is not, they're not couching it as a retaliatory strike. They are couching it as a preemptive strike, exactly, because things were going to happen, and therefore we sort of neutralized it.
Under international law, there's no concept of retaliation of this kind, right? So your right is of self-defense, you can stretch it to preemptive, hence the emphasis on the danger of new threats emanating, so on and so forth. It's the language is very carefully chosen. Essentially to block off any possible legal questioning about what India has done. And I think the non-military part of the phrase that the Foreign Secretary used is to signal to the Pakistani side and perhaps to global public opinion that we are consciously trying to de-escalate. So we are using language that is intended to de-escalate. And maybe by doing so, we hope that there will not be pressure on us from our friends and partners to back off and to show greater restraint, quote unquote.
AVM Kak, what is the implication of going beyond POK? Because in the past, the argument has been that what happens between India and Pakistan across the line of control is routine. A few raids take place and that's fine. Things won't escalate. But this is something really, really drastic and different. India hasn't probably crossed into Pakistani heartland, say, post 1971. So how do you read this?
It is a very, very, as we said in the beginning, I think everyone tended to agree that this is a major departure from our normal, conflagrations across the LOC, because now one side has chosen mainland of another country, even if it is made to appear this is non-military, but you are violating the territory of Pakistan. So if there is a reaction, it will only be because of this factor. It is not, they may not have been a reaction if this had been on POK, but since this, because they have to answer to the world, as it is Pakistan's reputation is mud. Now there are a lot of pressures within. There is also the fact
Pakistan military will have to.
Jaish-e-Mohammed, which is under the tutelage of Pakistan Army and ISI, they may turn the governments and ISI's worst enemies, because if they don't react, they will say, we have sacrificed so many years of our effort in support of your intentions and action, and here there is nothing coming by way of support from us, from you. So I think Pakistan is up against a whole heap of challenges. That is why our strategizing on the international, domain is extremely crucial, because there are pressures that can be built on Pakistan by others. Otherwise, in response to your question, we then get into an escalation ladder. Although General Ghafoor has mistakenly and rather boastfully said Pakistan will dominate the escalation ladder, nothing is further from the truth.
But just now, 10 minutes ago, a PMO official in Pakistan has clarified that once again Indian government has resorted to a self-serving, reckless and fictitious claim, and that there has been no attack in Balakot in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, and the claim of high casualties is pure fiction.
So you have it's a very simple thing. What Pakistan has done is, you have given a challenge to Pakistan. Pakistan has neatly sidestepped it. And if I may give a boxing analogy, when you're in a boxing match, ducking punches is sometimes as important as landing a punch on the other person.
Which is not too bad in this particular case.
So I think I must say that Pakistan is playing it very smartly, because now that pressure, when you say this is a fictitious, you go back to that old, to prove that you actually destroyed something. Do we have satellite pictures? Can you give me lat long of that camp?
The combat aircraft would have cameras.
No, what I'm trying to say is that when you're trying to dominate the information system narrative, so in fact what Pakistan can do, hypothetically, is that send an aircraft up, drop 10 bombs in some isolated part of that Muzaffarabad, and say this is where the Indians dumped their bombs, and they flew back. Whereas they will not allow anyone to go to Balakot to check out where that. See, the government, if it had, to be very frank, if the government, now we have already discussed the necessity for vagueness. But if there was no necessity for vagueness, the government could have given us lat long of that place.
There is a on this business of videos or imagery. The imagery will be available with the Air Force.
That's right.
It is for what political use you want to make of that imagery. If you put it out in the public domain at this point of time, then you're increasing the chances of a retaliation by Pakistan, because now you can't deny.
Siddharth, I mean, going with that logic, so Pakistan has given what Mr. Modi wants at this point of time, and they have also eased out of the situation by saying that, hey, no attack took place. But for the Indian public, there is an attack, and the government has claimed that. So how do you sort of see this counterclaims?
I don't want to speculate on what Mr. Modi wants or doesn't want, quite frankly. But I think the Pakistani response this time is similar to
he wants retaliation against what happened in Pulwama.
Well, I mean, no, he wanted retaliation, but I'm saying whether he wants them to come back and hit India and how he would respond. I'm saying there's a whole debate on that as well. Let's not go there. But the Indian handling of this attack is very similar to its handling of the 2016 surgical strike, insofar as no details are being disclosed, right? At least this time you've said Balakot. Last time there was no physical identification of any place at all, right? In fact, he just said along the LOC. That was the phrase that the DGMO used. Now we've identified Balakot and spoken about a Jaish camp. But beyond this, I don't expect the government of India to release any information. If at all there is a political element to this, you may see footage coming out on friendly channels closer to election day. The way footage of the 2016 surgical strike was, came before the UP elections, well past any retaliation threat from Pakistan. So you may see this game being played in that way. The Pakistanis, I think, have decided that now may not be the best time to want to escalate or to up the ante, and they already have uploaded footage or images of what they claim is bomb damage by the Indians.
Right, yeah.
They've shown a few
in the forest,
forests and trees, etc. Which but I think unlike the LC, unlike the 2016 surgical strike, if something has happened, it's going to be harder for the Pakistani government to keep this under wraps. For the simple reason that Balakot is in KPK, and you have more, it's easier for reporters to get there than it is to get to very remote places along the LC.
What is likely to be a Pakistani response in case the Pakistanis decide to respond? Now that they have ruled out that there was any attack from the Indian side to begin with, they are likely to sort of act in a similar manner. But if you go back to 2016 September, you see that after the surgical strikes, the violence in general in Jammu and Kashmir went up. You had more terrorist attacks, you had more infiltration, you had more attacks against CRP, BSF and the Indian Army convoys. So what kind of response do you expect as a military man?
Since the problem is initiated from the Pakistani side, and this problem is 30 years old, and it's reached a threshold beyond the acceptability of the government in India as also the public, because it has created a very humongous kind of anti-Pakistan wave within the country. So to that extent, I feel that if the deniability works and they don't go beyond the deniability and leave it at that, and I think it may be in India's interest to also let it be that way, because the political capital from this has been taken, the international impact this has made is also pretty good for the country and particularly for the government. I think that is where it should be left. The response, if it comes, will be what you said, absolutely right. Pakistan is most unlikely to come to one of our VAs, VPs, which is within the country, mainland India. They will confine themselves to what they do best, that is terrorism. So they will, and if this in some ways links up with the developments in Afghanistan, in the sense that what is more likely that agreement is not going to come through. So there will be some elements available for sending to the east, and Pakistanis in any case have enough terrorists on their soil to be able to be utilized for this. I think terrorism will remain the option, but it is not likely that they will start that right now. They will just enhance the rate at which it is taking place, and they will avoid any attacks like Pulwama. Now, Pulwama, whether it happened with Pakistani generals and ISI's knowledge is a different question. We cannot.
Dr. Joshi, now that if Pakistan does not respond to this attack by India, does that mean that we have now created a new acceptable threshold for Pakistan? That until now it was across the line of control. Now it's actually mainland Pakistan. Is it creating a new threshold?
Well, that is what the Pakistanis will reflect hard on. Exactly. Meaning, in the sense, having sidestepped, to use the boxing analogy, meaning there's a limit to how much you can duck. At some point or the other, you got to go in and fight also. So, in the sense that if the Pakistanis do not respond, so therefore you've created a new threshold, as you have rightly pointed out. Then the Pakistanis are the guys who are the losers, in the sense we have pushed a little bit ahead. And don't forget one very important thing. Unlike in other places, in India for some reason, the use of air power was considered escalatory. Now you have, yes, so now what you have done is that you have crossed that Rubicon, meaning you've now said air power is usable on counter-terror missions. That's what you're saying. In mainland Pakistan. So there are two firsts that you have this thing. One is striking mainland Pakistan. Second is use of air power on counter-terror missions.
You're right. The Pakistanis will have to sit and think hard about it, in terms of strategy, grand strategy. Siddharth, coming to you, the Prime Minister's office in Pakistan has just put out this tweet. This action has been done for domestic consumption, being in election environment, putting regional peace and stability at grave risk. The claimed area of strike is open for the world to see the facts on ground. What do you make of this tweet from
Well, there's several elements in that. They're questioning the damage done and they're questioning the motive. There can be no denying the fact that there is a political element to the use of military in these circumstances, but there is also a military objective.
Right.
There is also a diplomatic objective. So it's not quite so simple as the way Imran Khan's office will suggest. Pulwama happened and India needs to respond or needs to figure out a way to act or neutralize the Jaish. One can argue as to whether this is the best way to do that. But there's no denying the security or military dimension either, right? I would say that we're going to see a string of statements coming out from the Pakistani side, because let's not forget, they're denying the Indian claim of a lot of damage having been done on a terror camp. They're not denying the intrusion.
That's right.
There are some reports from the ground.
Which location that they are?
There's a Reuters report of Pakistani villagers saying that they were injured in Indian bombing. So it's quite possible that despite Pakistan saying that the Indian claim of having destroyed a terrorist camp is rubbish, they may still also be considering some kind of retaliation.
There's a reference to the Indian elections here in Imran Khan's.
Well, I mean, he has to ask himself then whether a Pakistani response to what India has done will also further help in an election scenario, right? So there's various ways that you can argue this, right? If you're in election season, everything that happens is happening because of the elections, right? So, and I'm not discounting the fact that there is a political dimension. Mr. Modi made it very clear the day after Pulwama happened that he saw this as a political opportunity, right? And it's there in his speeches. He's talking about the important. He says in Jhansi, I think he said ki ek baar aur mazboot sarkar lao, right? Exactly. So he's been very clear from day one.
And today he's been saying that.
He's been saying that, and the speech even at the National War Memorial. So there's no denying the fact that he's going to use this as a political opportunity, right? But Pakistan cannot deny that there is a problem that it has refused to deal with over all these years, and how Pakistan's refusal to deal with that issue has cleared the pitch as far as regional peace is concerned, right? So Imran Khan cannot walk away from his responsibility in this matter, nor can the Pakistani military. And I would say that as of today, it's still wide open as to how this game is going to go down.
Here is my last question. That's rather conceptual in nature. I'm going to ask each of you to sort of respond to that, and with that we'll wind it up. For a very long time, the fear in India was that we should not cross Pakistan's threshold, the red lines. Now there are two sort of red lines. One is the escalation red line, the other is the nuclear, or let's say the nuclear bluff and the escalation bluff. By going into the Pakistani mainland, has the Indian side called the dual Pakistani bluff, the escalation bluff and the nuclear bluff? I'll start with you, Dr. Joshi.
You see, the escalation has happened in the Kashmir Valley. The Pulwama attack, as has been noted, is perhaps the most serious attack on security forces anywhere. And this was a busload of essentially unarmed policemen who were going on leave or something. So this was not an attack on some picket or something like that. So what I'm saying is one escalation, a massive escalation. We are talking from 1990 all the way to now. This is the largest single casualty that security forces have suffered.
My point
So
is,
I'm saying
that they will sort of escalate.
Correct. But what I'm trying to say is that this escalation has been, when you then escalate, when the Indian side then escalates it, it's responding to a particular situation. Meaning a very serious thing happened in Pulwama. So an equally serious step has been taken by the Indian side. Both sides have upped the ante. Now the question is, let's see what Pakistan does, because Indians have made their point.
So you think the bluff has been called, or you don't think so?
I don't think the bluff has been called as yet.
AVM, the fear that the Indian side has always had is this: if we go kinetic against Pakistan in mainland Pakistan, this will lead to a spiral, and this conflict will sort of spiral up. Escalation will happen. How we overcome that fear? What does surgical strikes of 2016 and this strike in Balakot today, does it show that we've overcome that fear? Does it show that the bluff that Pakistan has been using, quote unquote, that has been called?
Happymon, in terms of whatever strategic culture we have developed post 1998 after Pokhran II, I don't think it is fear. If we see the narratives during Vajpayee,
It's not fear.
Yeah, it is actually wisdom.
Interesting.
It is wisdom, and very, very desirable wisdom, because we mustn't forget that the number one driver of India's grand strategy is to be where we have chosen to be in 2047, second largest economy in the world in PPP terms, 100 years after independence. And in a sense, one can get tempted to use the expression, empire has struck back in 2047. So I think we should keep that in mind, and some of what has happened is indicative of this fact that we have all the manner in which the briefings have been done, who came, who didn't come, what words have been used, reflect that level of maturity, and the use of the expression, rather oxymoronic in this case, non-military means to go to the... But we have, as you said, we have crossed over the boundaries of Pakistan. And that is why it complicates Pakistan's reactions. If Pakistan doesn't react, then it will be seen as now it's par for the course for India.
Siddharth, where do you stand on that? Is that wisdom, or is that a sort of deliberate strategy, testing them inch by inch, bit by bit?
I will build on what the AVM said. It's wisdom of a different kind as well. India did not resort to these kinds of kinetic operations in the past, largely because I believe it knew that this is not an effective way to stop the problem of terrorism. And nothing that I have seen since 2016 or even today convinces me that India is going to solve the J&K terror problem through these means. Let's not forget, okay, 40 people is the largest ever casualty rate
For a very long time.
in J&K, right? In one incident. What happened in Chhattisgarh a couple of years ago? 75 CRPF Jawans were killed, not by Pakistan, right? But by an internal issue that you have not been able to resolve. And the manner in which the government is handling the J&K situation leads me to believe that the internal challenge in J&K, even if you manage to get Pakistan off your back, is not going to go away very easily, right? So I think that the wisdom of Indian statecraft and military thinking in the past was that you deal with threats as they come. You have tactical operations to deal with tactical threats, but never did we delude ourselves into believing that these kinds of means are going to finish off the problem of terror. And I only hope that our military planners and our political leadership do not get seduced by this idea and do not get seduced by the political adulation that they will no doubt receive for having done this, into believing that the problem can be wished away simply by going down this route. Because if you go down this route, returns will not be forthcoming. Even after the 2016 surgical strikes, you had Nagrota, you had Sanjuvan, and other smaller incidents, and of course Pulwama.
Violence has only gone up.
Exactly, violence has gone up. So I would say that,
And Pathankot.
and you know, essentially what's going to happen is that you will then start moving up the escalatory ladder with unpredictable consequences. Because as Manoj said, that once you use these kinds of means, there's no telling what kind of damage gets caused. So I would say that it's time to sit back and reflect on how India takes stock of the threat that terrorist groups pose, and for India to look at a full range of options, including political initiatives in J&K, including this may sound very unpopular and even crazy at this time, but you cannot close the diplomatic door with Pakistan either. Look at getting regional powers to influence the Pakistani side.
There has been an eclectic strategy.
Exactly. It has to be a composite strategy to deal with this threat.
Thank you for coming on the program, Siddharth.
Thank you.
AVM, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Joshi,
Okay.
wonderful having you.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.